Hello, good morning, and welcome to everyone. I'm Councillor Darren Sanders. I'm a Liberal Democrat councillor for Baffins, North Milton and South Copner, and in this context I'm the Cabinet Member for Housing and Tackling Homelessness. Before we begin, I have to do some housekeeping stuff around safety, which says that if the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not use the lifts. Please assemble in front of Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the fire marshal regulations of the Guildhall Trust, which is the building we're in, anyone who signed in at the, signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of the meeting. There is also live web streaming, so hello to everyone who is watching. And I want to draw everyone's attention to the fact that this is being live streamed, and so everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera, including those making including those making deputations. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they don't wish to be recorded. Please, can everyone use the microphones? And remember to switch them off when they have finished. So I will start by making introductions, and I will go from back to front, starting on my very far right.
I'm Sally Scattergood, Assistant Director for Housing.
Thank you, Sally.
Nicola Clanahan, Head of Housing Community Services.
James Hill, Director of Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services.
Adam Hardwick, Assistant Director Buildings.
Steve Groves, Head of Building Maintenance.
Jo Bennett, Assistant Director Housing Need and Supply.
Alan Denford, Finance Manager for Housing.
Roman Dent, Councillor for Copner Ward.
Cal Corkery, Councillor for Charles Dickens Ward.
Who I believe is sitting in the leader's seat, which is always apparently a nice experience, I'm told.
Councillor Charlotte Gerardo, Central Southsea.
And finally, no, you said you're who you are. No, there's a reason I'm doing it this way.
Trevor Lovett, resident in Southsea and leaseholder.
Thank you, Trevor.
Maria Cole, Residents Consortium.
Now, there's a reason why Maria is last, because it is her last meeting. After several decades of doing a fantastic job in terms of representing the Residents Consortium, she's finally getting her life back. So I just want to say on behalf of all, thank you very, very much for everything you have done. We are incredibly grateful. You're not getting a gold watch or anything like that. I thought I'd cheer you up. But we are all incredibly grateful for what you will do, and we will find a way of marking this, I know. All right? And can that be recorded? Oh, hello you. I forgot about you. Sorry. Hello you.
Alison Harper, Democratic Services. And yes,
Alison,
I will record it.
And you will record it in the minutes. That's incredibly kind. Thank you very much indeed. So I have received no requests for deputations. I've received no apologies for absence. Now, does Cal or Charlotte or Ray or me have anything interesting to declare as far as this is concerned? Cal?
Personal interest, and I'm a council tenant.
Thank you very much. That's very kind. Okay, so we will progress to item number 3, which is the interim report on progress of Council Housing Maintenance and Improvements Programme. Adam, you're slated to do this.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. So yeah, this is a report on the progress of Council Housing Maintenance and Improvements Programme. So basically back in March, when our outline programme of works is set for the year, the purpose of this report is to provide a sort of half-year update against that, to outline progress of works and any sort of pressures the service is feeling. The report recommends the Cabinet member notes the budget pressures that we're receiving, and also that decision is taken to review and reprogramme the previous capital programme based on legislative requirements of the Building Safety Act. So in terms of summarising the report, I'll just go through each section and sort of pull out some of the key information for you. So if I start at section 4 around the industry update, so this is basically reviewing what's going on in the general industry and comparing that to sort of what we're feeling. So we've taken information from the Building Cost Information Service, and I think generally what we're seeing there ties in with what we're experiencing in Portsmouth. So in terms of tender prices, they're generally starting to stabilise in the industry. We're not seeing significant rises. However, it's worth noting that the prices we are receiving are significantly higher than what we would have seen sort of pre-COVID levels. So there's probably around a 25% uplift sort of baked in now going forward, which obviously has an impact. Around material supply, generally the situation is improving, and we're seeing sort of supply materials, which is what we'd expect to see normally. So day-to-day items are generally available. There obviously are some specialist items which are still on a long leading time, but again, that is improving. I think that the biggest impact that the industry is seeing, and again, we're seeing the signs of that, is around sort of driving wage growth. And this is really through high levels of inflation, which is obviously leading to increased salaries in the industry, which then has a knock-on effect, through contractors and suppliers of increasing prices. So I think that's the key thing we're looking at in the industry is around sort of wage growth. In terms of the works that we've been undertaking, so I've split the report down to look at sort of revenue, which is our sort of repairs service, and then also the capital programme. So at a high level, in terms of our revenue expenditure, the team continues to undertake a significant amount of works for our service providers. And as of 1st September, we'd undertaken over 24,000 day-to-day repairs, something that helps give quite insight into the scale of the work the team do. We've also undertaken void work, which has allowed 528 new tenancies to start. So on our void side, we've increased capacity, so we're able to turn around voids in excess of the actual number of properties that become void. So that's an improved position, and we are able to let more properties, which is positive. And around sort of compliance works, we've undertaken over 9,000 compliance checks or inspections. That's gas safety checks, electrical inspections, and fire risk assessments as well. On the capital programme, this is split down into sort of response capital. So this is things like kitchens, bathrooms, new boilers, etc. And you'll see in the report 6.3, we've undertaken a significant amount of work ongoing in there to improve residents' properties. From the project side, we've currently got 17 projects which we're working on. Again, a wide range in terms of scale and value. But generally, they are progressing as per was outlined in the budget book in March. So that's progressing in line with that. We've also, as a new area, have taken on a number of large-scale void properties. So these are voids where there's a fair amount of work needed at the void stage, and they're undertaken as projects now rather than through the repair service. And we've got 27 which we've worked on, and again, that's helping to improve our void situation. Another key aspect of work that the team have been undertaking is around the sort of Building Safety Act. So we've established a consultant framework around building safety, and that's allowing our building safety manager to implement building safety cases for 22 blocks of flats which are in scope, and that's all blocks over 7 stories. They're all registered with the building safety regulator now, and we are starting to progress with resident consultation and undertaking surveys to those buildings. In terms of budget pressures and future issues around Section 7. On the revenue side, so under repairs, we're currently estimating a £1 million overspend of that budget. Whilst the level of repairs undertaken is generally consistent with previous years, the main driver for the increase is again, go back to the point about wage increases. We've agreed a 5% wage increase with our service providers, and that was necessary not only to retain existing staff, but also allow them to help recruit staff. Obviously, we need staff to maintain the level of service that we offer, so that's a necessary aspect we've needed. And again, whilst there was a significant rise in the budget this year, we're still seeing very high inflation. So, whilst it is slowly falling, I think it's 8.9% in March, it's about 6.3 now. Because the contracts are cost reimbursable contracts, any rise in materials or subcontractors pricing caused by inflation is directly transferred through the contract, so that accounts for the rise there. We are taking action to proactively manage that. So we're undertaking a lot more inspection of our repairs. And the key here is obviously to make sure that we're diagnosing the repairs correctly, and we're undertaking the right repair at the right time. So that may be about, if we get a request for a new kitchen, we're going out inspecting the kitchen, understanding what the issues are, can it be repaired or does it need replaced, and making that judgment to make sure that, that we're spending money wisely. And again, that increased level will hopefully, improve control of that budget. On the capital side, I think in terms of this year, we are generally progressing in line with what the approved budget was. So we're not predicting an overspend on that side. I think the key thing, though, probably to draw attention to is probably more, like the historical situation of where we are. So the way the capital budget is formed, we have a major repairs allowance, which is an allocation of capital funding each year. And then alongside that, we have a major repairs reserve. So this is capital funding that we haven't spent in previous years. That's rolled forward. Due to the scale of the works that we're undertaking, and obviously the rising cost increases, in the financial year 22-23, we saw a significant draw on the reserve. So that was a £9.86 million draw on the reserve, and that was for necessary works. So the expenditure was valid, but obviously, that's a significant draw on that budget. This year, we've recognised that in our programme, so we've budgeted and planned the works accordingly. But again, we are still anticipating a £3.69 million draw on the reserve this year. It's predicted that the resultant balance will be sort of around 9.2 million in the reserve, which we need to maintain, obviously for any unforeseen events or issues with our buildings. So it's not sustainable to carry on, undertaking programmes of work where we're having a significant draw on the reserve, and we need to try and move to a position where we're undertaking works, in line with the major repairs allowance budget rather than drawing on the reserve. That sort of leads on really to one of the requests within the report to review and reset the previous iterations of the capital programme. So again, in 22-23 we outlined a proposed plan over a number of years to install particularly fire doors and sprinklers to a number of our tower blocks. However, due to the budget pressures, and the rising costs through wage and inflation, we feel we need to review that. Another key factor is the Building Safety Act, which has come into effect from the 1st of April 2023. That has broadened the scope of buildings that we need to look at in that context. So the previous programme focused on 10 tower blocks. However, the Building Safety Act, the scope broadens that to include 22 blocks of flats. So from our side, it's really important that, given the budgets available, we are focusing the expenditure on where the highest priority is. And it could be that there's buildings that are outside of that original 10 blocks, which are a higher priority. So, we want the opportunity to review our buildings, do the building safety cases, and then use that to inform a revised programme of works. I think it's really important, just to stress and emphasise that we are fully committed to installing, fire doors and sprinkler systems within our blocks of flats. But the key message is we need to, reprioritise where we do that, and also with the building safety casework, we're required to undertake more invasive investigation to the blocks of flats. So there's a potential that we may uncover a need for different types of work. So, for example, there could be compartmentation works and fire stopping that is deemed a higher priority than potentially, doing sprinklers to a block. So that's something that we need to, consider going forward. I think all of this as well ties in with the sort of ongoing work we're doing around the asset management strategy. So that will help inform, that we have, a longer term plan for the HRA and where we do our investment. And we are also looking at other options to gain funding. So recently the Social Housing Decarbonation Fund has reopened, and we are exploring options to bid under that. and that potentially can gain funding to improve properties where the EPC rating is below a C, to bring up to a C. So again, if there's other ways that we can gain additional funding, you know, we will explore all the options. But I think in summary, the key thing is requesting, you know, to be able to review and reprogram that based on the findings of the building safety cases which are being prepared currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I have my own views, but I will go last, if that's all right. I'll start, if I may, with Trevor. Do you have any questions or comments about this report? No. Okay, thank you, Trevor. Maria, do you have any questions or comments about this report?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Point 53. Yes, I agree with the report. It's really good news that voids are being cleared quickly enough and we're getting new tenants in, so I'm really pleased about that. Going on to 7.3, I know that the pay rises are still important for the people that are on the ground doing the work. And you talked in the report about falls in cost are slower than anticipated. I've actually seen cost for myself in the supermarket still going up. I've not noticed any falls at all, and I visit various supermarkets just so I can get the best bargains. So I think they've definitely slowed down because some are still going up. 7.9. The only set of abbreviations that worry me the most are MRR, Major Repairs Reserve. The thought of council having to use any reserves when we still need to be ready for future events, draining us and possibly leaving the council with a negative budget. I'm thinking particularly of Horatio in Leamington. Hopefully that was a one-off and will never happen again. But I think we still need to be very, very careful what we do with any reserves that we have, just in case anything drastic does happen in the future. And my final comment for this is on page 21, it's the integrated assessment. I feel that the section on social value is quite important, especially where it is done for local tenants who may have had many works carried out on the property they live in. I'm speaking particularly of somewhere like where I live, Ladywood House. We've had years of building work, which is still continuing. And it would be nice for the contractors to actually produce some social value and do things for the tenants that have put up with all this building work for some years. So that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Maria. I'm just making some notes of that as well. Kat, any questions or comments? Or comments, I should say.
Thank you. Just get my notes out. Okay, great, thanks. Thank you for the report. I think it's useful for us to have this kind of in year to get up to date with exactly where we are and what any potential implications have been of inflation and other financial issues. In terms of sprinklers and fire doors in high-rise blocks, so obviously a lot of those high-rise blocks are in Charles Dickens wards, kind of regularly engage with a lot of those residents, and from their perspective, in 2021-22, in the budget that was agreed, the capital budget, it said those blocks were getting fire doors and sprinklers, and in fact I think there was even a published programme of works that said in which order they would get them. So naturally people found out about this, we went and told them and said, good news Mrs Jones, you'll be getting a new fire door next financial year. And people were kind of quite happy with that because that was the published information that was available. Since then, it seems to me there hasn't really been much of an update. It's fallen off the agenda. I know it's here today, but that was 2 years ago. Some people in these blocks were expecting these works to have been completed by now. And it seems to me that maybe, well, I guess the question is, what kind of communication has there been with residents to make them aware of these changes within the programmes and the expected works that are being undertaken to their blocks?
Adam?
So under the Building Safety Act, one of the key things is about improving resident engagement and making residents, aware of their buildings and sort of works that are happening to them. So for all of the blocks within the scope of it, we are undertaking resident engagement events, and I think we've undertaken about 9 of those so far. and that really is about meeting the residents, and the key thing is understanding how they want to be engaged with, what sort of methods, what information they want, and that's not just a one-off thing. The Act puts an onus on us to do that repeatedly, so from that we can develop resident engagement strategies for each building to make them fully aware of the surveys we're doing and the work's coming out of that. So I think that's an ongoing thing and an area definitely that hopefully the Act will improve, and we are committed to working on as well alongside residents.
Anything else, Cal?
Just to follow on from that point, thank you, and kind of note the engagement sessions have been organised. Just an aside on that, obviously all of those are within the day. So some of the feedback that myself and St Thomas Ward councillors provided, that it would be useful to have some of these sessions perhaps in evenings or weekends. The response to which was, well, people can always email in or call in their feedback if they want to, which is great. However, some people prefer that face-to-face contact, and there may be particular communication needs that they have, which mean that face-to-face contact is their preferred method and maybe the only way that they're able to communicate their views. So I guess I'll just echo that request again. These engagement sessions are obviously taking place now, or kind of previous weeks, and ongoing basis. And I guess the point I would make is that that's, for some people, 2 years after they were told you will be getting fire doors and sprinklers, and maybe a year after some of them were told that the works would be completed. And it just seems to me no one has actually said to them officially that this is no longer taking place. And I'm not even entirely sure if that's actually what's happening at these engagement sessions. Are people being told, look, you might now not be getting sprinklers in your blocks? If so, great, but if not, maybe that's something that could be factored into them.
Thank you, Cal. Adam?
Yeah, I think, to be clear, we are doing sprinkler work. So we've obviously completed Ladywood House, and we are doing a scheme which will start this financial year to Handsworth House. I appreciate in the budget book it had a programme of works, but in terms of we've only communicated to residents to tell them they're getting the works where we're actually doing the works. So I appreciate people may have read that report or programme and then seen our blocks listed, but we haven't actually written to those residents saying you are going to get a sprinkler system installed, because we would still be in the evaluation stage of that. So I appreciate there's probably a bit of miscommunication there, but where we said we're doing it, we are still doing it currently. And I think potentially going forward with the revised capital programme, I really think that fire safety works are going to form a huge part of that. I think when we come back in March, I think the majority of the programme will probably be fire safety works. So like I said, it's not that we're not doing it and we aren't committed to doing it. It's just about prioritising it to make sure we're doing it where the most urgent need is.
Cal, if it's okay, I'll return to that point when it comes to my turn, if that's all right with you. Anything else you wanted to raise at all?
I guess just the point I would make is that while people might not have had a letter through their door saying this is what's taking place, obviously information was put into the public domain that contained the name of their block, works that were being done, and dates. So therefore, some people, and obviously as ward councillors, while not many residents maybe go through line by line of the reports that are published, we do, and then we go and engage with residents and we feed back that information. So when it changes, I think it's just important that there's kind of transparency and good communication around that where possible.
Okay, thank you for that, Cal. Charlotte.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question on the sort of fire safety aspect as well. I was just wondering if a view had been sort of taken from the local fire service regarding the delays to the building safety works, and if they were deemed to be acceptable by them. Thank you.
Anyone?
What I would say is that we meet regularly with Hampshire Fire. We have meetings every quarter with them, and we do update them about what our programme of works are. So, and we talk about any of the high-risk blocks. That is the focus of that agenda. So we are regularly communicating at regular quarterly meetings that we have with the fire service.
Steve, that actually, forgive me, Charlotte, that doesn't answer a question. You've done it beautifully, I have to say, but it doesn't quite do that. Has the fire service expressed any reservations about the issues that we face and about the problems and the potential delays in the proposed programme?
They haven't raised any issues. Obviously, like all of us, we would like to do the work on every block today, but they're aware of our programme. They're aware of what work we're doing, and then we are communicating that update. And we are talking about, we are specifically, if there was any blocks that had any issues, we're obviously doing fire risk assessments in every one of those buildings every year. And we do joint inspections with the fire service on a regular basis every year as well on those high risk blocks. So we're always talking about those blocks, and they're aware of the works that we're doing, and have not raised any issues with any specific blocks of the programme of what we're doing at the moment.
I think that does answer your question finally. Anything else, Shot? Thank you, Steve, by the way. Anything else? No, that's kind. Ray?
Yeah, just one. On the gas safety checks, are the boilers being serviced at the same time? And are all the gas appliances got CO alarms attached or installed in the proximity?
Yes, so when we do the gas safety checks, that is doing the landlord's gas safety certificate, and it is about servicing the boiler at the same time. And for the last year, we, as part of doing that servicing, the contractor has been installing CO detectors, and also in the last year, any other day-to-day contractors. That has been part of the scope of their service. If they go into any property and see that there's no CO alarm, then they would install that at the same time.
Does that answer your question? Any comments at all, Comrade? Yes, fine. Isn't it? Okay, thank you. Well, thank you all for that. I have one question, and then I have some observations of my own. My question is to Alan, our finance bod. If we carry on taking money out of the major repairs reserve in the way that we've done it, in other words, if we do nothing, when does the money run out? So when does the major repairs reserve, or MRR, as Maria's outlined in the jargon, run out?
So the major repairs reserve, we anticipate will be 9 million at the end of this
You just said 9 billion. Can I have that, please?
9 million.
Okay.
Sorry if you misheard. The capital programme going forward is based on a programme where the expenditure is equal to the major repairs allowance made in the year. So at the moment we have no plans to run that balance down below 9 million. Obviously if we did, then that would run out. If we overspent by 3 million, then it would last another 3 years.
3 years.
But there are no plans to do that at this point in time.
I get that.
And I absolutely agree with Maria's point. I am keen to see that balance retained for emergency works, and ideally it would be higher. But obviously, as always, we have to balance essential works in the current against keeping a provision for emergency works going forward.
Thank you, Alan. I have some observations for that. Firstly, thank you very much for your questions and comments, and several of them reflect my own concerns and worries about all this. Frankly, I wouldn't start from here. I don't think any of us would start from here. But we face a simple problem. Our income is flat and our costs are going up. And as Alan has outlined, and Maria's outlined, drawing on the reserves all the time means one thing: they run out. And that is highly, highly frustrating and depressing. So as Cal pointed out earlier on, we do this in the name of increasing transparency to try and tell tenants and residents and everyone else where we are and what we're doing. Unfortunately, the situation at the moment is bleak, as our costs are rising and our income is flat. We are not alone, by a long stretch. A recent letter by the local, all party groups on the Local Government Association to the Chancellor ahead of the autumn statement talked about the Construction Output Price Index, which I think is the cost, for new work and repairs and maintenance rose by about 15% in the 2 years to June 2023. Rising interest rates have also led to increases in the costs of borrowing. So if we borrow to try and bail things out, the Public Works Loans Board rates at the end of 2023 were more than 4% higher than 2 years previously. The 7% rent cap that we've had, according to the Local Government Association, will lead to a cumulative deficit to council housing revenue accounts across England of £664 million after 2 years. That's not good. So you've got two choices: do nothing or do something. And I think, unfortunately, we have to do something. That, however, does lead to a whole series of issues that are related to that. I'm delighted, the good bits are that I'm delighted that we're doing 24,000 repairs. And I believe that's more than last year. That's good news. I'm delighted that the number of new council homes is going up, not just through our excellent buying back programme, but also by the work of the Voids team, as Maria has outlined. That's good news. I'm delighted that we're carrying on and doing inspections, which I know many other social landlord providers didn't do during the pandemic. We chose to because we put resident safety first. And so when we're in this dire situation, which has frankly often been caused by circumstances out of our control, I believe it's called trashing the economy. So driving up inflation, driving up business rates, making many council tenants and leaseholders' bills go up significantly. Unfortunately, we have to pick up the pieces, which is very sad. So we therefore have to try and build it around some principles, and the first principle is the safety of our buildings. And I want to come back to what Cal said earlier, Adam and team. We did tell people we were going to do this. And I have a quaintly old-fashioned view, which if you tell someone, you do it. And if it doesn't happen, because stuff happens, and we've had a lot of stuff over the last 2 years, as I've said, not least with the crashing of the economy, courtesy of the current government, then it is a case of explaining to people what the situation is. So I'm suggesting that happens, and we explain it as part of the business safety case that we do, and that we also include sprinklers and fire doors as part of the mix in that safety case. I agreed to it after some lobbying from the Fire Brigades Union, frankly, and reading what they did. And we know what they're lobbying for years about it. I've had mixed responses, Cal, I have to say, from blocks where it's happened. Some people who think it's a complete waste of time, and other people who think it's very good. I happen to think it's very good, but I think sprinklers and fire doors should be part of that building safety case mix. That doesn't mean to say it'll happen everywhere, but it should be definitely part of that mix. Okay. I think as far as the integrated impact assessment stuff that Maria raised, it's also true. Doing stuff and not doing stuff affects our tenants and leaseholders quite a lot. There is a lot of ability through social value and to provide social value as well. We're doing it very well with Avocet House in Milton, whereby there have been some problems and some delays. That's inevitable, but we are doing some good work around that, so I think that should also be put in the mix as well. As far as engagement events are concerned, as someone who's been moaned at by people in my ward that I don't hold surgeries in the evening, we're doing surgeries in the evening, admittedly online, because that seems the easiest way of doing it rather than dragging people out in the cold to a pub. So can I suggest, Adam, that as part of that work and future engagement events, we look at holding things in the evenings and weekends. Now, that may not be, oh, you're going to tell me no. Okay, that can be reviewed, but obviously we have to see how that works and how many people are involved as well. Yeah, and that can also form part of the estate service office checks as well with people. Okay, I know it's a bit of a hassle, but we have to try and navigate people through what is going to be a very sensitive and tough time due to circumstances that are beyond our control. So on that rather depressing picture, sorry Adam, thank you for being honest and open, that's been incredibly helpful. I will approve that report and carry out the various bits that I was told to carry out. I think it was note, approve and do stuff. I think that's fair, Alison. I think that's a posh way of saying it. But thank you very much. And if the situation improves, Adam and James, please let us know. And hopefully it will. But thank you very much for being honest, Adam. Right, we move to the second item on the agenda, which may be slightly better. Development of council homes, Twyford Avenue, Stamshaw. Jo.
Thank you. So the report seeks approval for the development of 6 council homes on the site of 305, 305A, 307 and 307A Twyford Avenue. The report also requests approval for a capital spend of £1.49 million from the housing revenue account. The dwellings are to be held in the HRA. The recommendations include the amendment to the capital programme for that 1.49, and they also ask for delegation to the Director of Housing, Neighbourhoods and Buildings and the Section 151 officer to amend the composition and spending profile of the proposed scheme if we need to change things to meet planning and design requirements, and also to agree the use of unsupported borrowing, grant funding and retained capital receipts to fund the development, ensuring obviously at all points that the scheme remains financially viable. We're also asking for delegation to the Director to apply for any grant funding to support the scheme. These properties were built in 1890 and were originally two houses, one a 3-bedroom, one a 4-bedroom. In 1974, the properties were converted into 4 flats, 2 on each side, and at the time, the rear party wall was rebuilt because of subsidence. 305A currently remains tenanted, with the tenant on the housing register waiting for a move. The tenant from 305 moved in May of 23, and 307 and 307A have been vacant for some time. In 2015, when 307 became vacant, PCC undertook structural investigations, and these were invasive investigations to understand the movement within the building. And then in 2016, when 307A became void, it was decided not to re-let the property because of this movement. In 2017, the HRA property team attempted to dispose of 307 and 307A, and legal issues relating to the boundary and the neighbouring property prevented that sale. The decision to sell, options to repair and development potentials were then reconsidered. I'm going to pass to Adam to take us through the building issues that were found.
Thanks for that, Joe. Adam?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. As Joe explained, the buildings themselves, they have a number of underlying structural issues. So, when it was converted in 1974, it was more than party wall. Most of the rear of the property was rebuilt and with new foundations because of subsidence at that time. In theory, that should have addressed the issues. However, the issues have persisted and they've moved to other areas of the building. So obviously that's stuff we've established during our surveys. In 2020, we appointed external structural engineers to do their own assessment to verify our findings. And I think we came to the same conclusion that the issues that were present. The report outlines them, but at a high level, there's bay windows to the front of the property, and the stonework is severely corroding due to is spalling due to corroding reinforcement. There's subsidence to the flank wall, and this is also, if you put a plumb on it, it's out of plumb by about 70 mils. So there's quite a significant lean on that. We found issues internally where when we actually opened up, so removed the plaster to see the construction. Where you got lintels which go above doorways, they weren't bearing sufficiently on the walls, so we've had to prop that to keep the building safe. And then also in the roof as well, I think that was previously replaced, but it hasn't been tied in properly, so it's pulling away from the building, and there's evidence of that where the ceiling joists have actually moved quite a distance away from the walls. So I think. Reviewing that at that point, we then looked at what's the repair options for the buildings, and I think once we'd done our assessment, we estimated that we'd be talking around sort of over £500,000 just to address the structural issues, and due to the extent of the works needed, that it wasn't feasible to do that in occupation. To do the bay windows, for example, we'd have to restrict access to the lounges because we'd have to close off those rooms. The significant propping and underpinning, which isn't safe to do really with residents fully in occupation, so that needed residents to move out. And then we also looked at considering the future life of the building. So that's a significant investment now just to fix the structural issues present, but it doesn't address ongoing maintenance of the building. So they're Victorian properties, the thermal efficiency of them isn't brilliant. So we'd have a property which we'd have to potentially firmly upgrade in the future. do basic, ongoing maintenance, such as replacing the roof, the windows, etc., which would be, outside of this level of work. And I think also there was the underlying concern that given there was, known issues with this building, in the 70s and significant work undertaken, that might have addressed the issue in that location, but it's moved it. If we then were to do significant structural works underpinning now, again, there's the ongoing risk that issue moves to another area of the building. So that sort of led to a more fuller review, which I'll hand back to Jo to go through.
Thanks, Adam. So on completion of that review, the residual risks and the remaining investment requirement to the property meant that the property was deemed beyond economic repair. At that time, we did consider sale of the asset. However, it was considered that given the poor quality of the property, sale of the asset may lead to the property being repaired at a low standard, which subsequently would put substandard accommodation into the private sector. And whilst the sale of the property to the private sector would have limited the council's liability, it was felt that it was a risk that wasn't appropriate. In June 22, officers met with ward councillors and the residents who were living in the property to explain the situation in relation to the building and the decision that the property was beyond economic repair. We shared the building issues and the financial position and presented these in full detail to those individuals, and they were able to ask questions and to challenge the officers on the findings. Residents from this point were assigned an estate manager from the local area office who's been their single point of contact to support them in the need to move to new housing. One resident has since moved and one tenant is currently awaiting a second offer of accommodation. To expedite the proposal, planning permission has been submitted to demolish the existing building and develop the land to provide the new accommodation. We've asked for 6 new one-bedroom, two-person properties and the associated landscaping. There's a high-level outline on Appendix 1. You'll see there also an outline timetable, and the reason for recommendations in summary are because the building's deemed beyond economic repair. The site can be redeveloped to accommodate more homes than currently sit on the site. The new homes will be of a higher standard and energy efficiency than the current homes. The new homes will provide much needed housing for residents, and the development will increase the overall number of homes in the HRA and improve the viability of the HRA, supporting the continued maintenance and tenant services we provide to our residents. Alan, would you like to comment on the financials?
Thank you, Jo. Nothing much to add to the comments in paragraph 8 of the report, just that there is a financial appraisal on this scheme that does show that it is viable over a 30-year period for the HRA business plan.
Okay, and thank you for that, all of you. Trevor, do you have any questions or comments about this? No? Thank you. Maria, do you have any questions or comments for the last time ever on anything?
Yes, I do. First of all, I think it's a very comprehensive report. I think it's really interesting for those who work for building firms and I do think that this is a golden opportunity to increase the number of one-bed flats and help people on the waiting list. Should I go through all that again?
I believe for posterity and the on-demand viewers. Please do.
It's a good job I've written it all down, isn't it? Right. Well, I do think this is a very comprehensive report. It's very interesting because I did work for a building firm years ago. I do think this is a golden opportunity to increase the number of one-bed flats and help people on the waiting list. Then I come to point 3 to 5. You have one resident who's waiting for accommodation. Will this tenant being moved out have a similar package of support as tenants of Horatio and Leamington?
Thanks, Maria. Our plan has been to provide a very supportive service. The single point of contact was to do that, and the person will be entitled to home loss and disturbance payments as they move. So, in essence, yes.
And then you have to go to page 33 because it's part of the integrated assessment. Along with other recent building plans, the council will be using passive house standards. Does this mean that all future developments will have these standards now as normal?
So the plan has been to design to passive standard. There will need to be an evaluation, and as you'll remember, we previously brought forward a report to look at the energy standards that we would build homes to. That will be coming forward in the forthcoming year. So we're aiming for passive standards, but we're also looking to always understand what that means for residents and what are the important things within those standards that actually keep people's bills low and that allow us to provide good quality homes for people.
And finally, I'm very interested in the timeline for these buildings, because they were Victorian houses built in 1890. Were these at that time private houses?
Don't know.
Does that mean that they were actually built and owned by the council?
We don't know.
Oh, right, because 84 years later, in 1974, they were converted to 4 flats. Were these flats private or PCC?
PCC.
Was there any structural inspection done at that time?
Yes, and that's when the conversion took place, was to take account of the structural findings, and the rebuilding of the property and the conversion happened at the same time. So we were able to find the plans from that conversion that show the walls that were rebuilt and also when the conversion happened. So that was done mindful of the condition at the time.
Right, because following on from that, 41 years later, in 2015, PCC, and I've underlined it because now I know it's PCC, did undertake a structural inspection when a lot of deteriorations had occurred. The inspection report is quite disquieting, and I'm frankly relieved that demolition and rebuilding will happen. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Maria. I will come back to a couple of those points when it's my turn. Ray, this is your gig. Tell us what's right and wrong about this then.
Thank you, Darren. Couple of things. I'm a bit concerned that it's taken so long to work out that this place is unsafe for human occupation. And also a little bit concerned that there is still someone living there. If this place is structurally unsound, how have we not got the guy out or the couple out into safer accommodation?
I'd like not to talk too specifically about one resident's circumstances, also given that the address is listed. But what I would say is that as soon as the property issues were found in 2015, that property was no longer let. The remaining property, when that person moved out, that property was no longer let. As soon as those things have been found to be understood, we've then moved into a point of monitoring that. The situation has been in discussion with the residents for some time so that they understood what was happening next door. As you can imagine, having empty properties next door is quite concerning. And we have worked in full consultation with the residents and the ward councillors so that they understood exactly what was happening and what we were doing. And the briefings have been very full and detailed. And you'll note from 3.25, the tenants are waiting an offer at this point. That's a second offer.
It was just the fact that it's the timescale and the property is deemed unsafe. The other thing is, can we just confirm that this property, even if we carried out the £500,000 worth of work that needs to be done to make it structurally safe, if my memory serves me right at a previous meeting, that we can't guarantee that other works need to be done afterwards?
Yeah, that's one of the main residual risks, is that as you start, you might find more work. And also, as Adam mentioned, as you complete those initial works, you aren't dealing with some of the core issues of a property of that age and standard.
Ray, was that all your questions and comments?
That's the one.
Thank you, Ray. Charlotte.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Joe and colleagues, for the report. I definitely agree with the decision that's been made to given the economic situation and the standards of the properties to put new homes there, and obviously it will increase the amount of properties we've got, which is obviously a very positive thing. I just had a couple of questions. So one is in terms of PCC purchasing the property. Sorry, this feels really weird to be asking a question to someone behind me, but I'm not looking at them. I'm looking at Councillor Sanders instead.
Oh my God, that's really worrying. I mean, at this time of the morning.
I just wondered how PCC came to sort of purchase it, and given what we know about the standards of the property, if we sort of knew about the situation with the condition of it back then. And then my other question is in relation to page 33, the carbon emissions section. It's really good to see this has been fleshed out since we had our briefing meeting in relation to any negative impacts and positive impacts. I still think there's a bit missing here about the impact of demolition, because there are carbon emissions related to that, and I think it's important for us to accept that there are, and also to try and work out what the impact of that is, essentially. Thank you.
Jo, can you answer point 2, and I will endeavour to answer point 1. Question 1 from Charlotte.
I'm going to leave point 2 to Adam.
Okay, thank you. I think they call that delegation in the management textbooks. Adam.
Yes. So I think regarding carbon emissions and demolition, we appreciate there is embodied carbon in the building. I think we've gone through the process of establishing, can we, retain the existing building and refurbish it, and all buildings get to the point where they get to the end of their economic life, and I think this is at this point. I think in terms of actually, as part of the demolition, we are looking to reuse materials as much as possible. So we'll try and recycle materials where we can. There's options around using, say, like the bricks, etc., for hardcore with the new properties as well. So again, you're sort of, you're still retaining some of that carbon. And I think obviously, like as a longer term perspective with the new building there, where it is designed to pass FAL standard, it'll be an electric, heated property, so it's not using fossil fuels. Be a lot more efficient, so the ongoing, in use carbon will be a lot lower than the existing building. But accepting, there is going to be some sort of embodied carbon issue, but it is what it is. We can't do too much about that other than try and reuse materials where we can.
I will come back to that as well. No, yes, I meant to answer the point. I'm not sure I was alive when this was done. I mean, the works were done in 1974 when I was 3. So that may be correct, but I think Joe's commendably honest answer, we ain't got a clue when it was bought. It may have been bought in 1890, 1900, 1910, 1920, no one's got a clue. All we know is the works were done in 1974 when I was 3, which shows my age. So I can't give you a straight answer to that question. Sorry. As I don't know when it was purchased, so I don't know if I was alive when that decision was taken. So sorry, I can't give you a straight answer, Charlotte. But if we know, we'll tell you. They don't know. Oh, God. Honesty, it's always a problem, I tell you. Cal, any questions or comments?
Yeah, I've got a few. I've got a few less, actually, because Maria did ask, I think, 2 or 3 of mine.
There were no rehearsals in this meeting,
Maria.
I tell you, right?
Just start off, thanks for the report. Obviously, it's always positive to see new homes being developed, but particularly like the kind of indicative design pictures that we've got. I think they look to be a good quality and not kind of maybe what people might traditionally associate with what council housing looks like. I think they look kind of innovative, modern, and places that I'm sure people would want to live, which is all good. Also, very keen to hear the kind of feedback about the assessment of sale and the concerns around transferring poor quality stock to the private sector. You'll know, Darren and others, that have kind of previously raised concerns around the council transferring any stock to the private sector, and I think that's another good argument I might use in future, should it ever come up again. So thanks for that. In terms of, I was going to talk about the existing residents, but I think that's the one Maria always picked me to, actually. It's good to know that they're getting the homes loss payments and being supported into new accommodation. In terms of the proposed design, Are any of these properties going to be accessible for people with disabilities, or are they just kind of general stock?
The aim for the ground floor properties is to make them as accessible as possible, but we're not looking for full disabled use.
Okay, that's great, thank you. A question about outside space. So currently, according to Google Maps at least, the area to the rear of the properties looks like a communal garden, I'm guessing, for the blocks, or at least for some of the flats within those blocks. The proposal is to remove most, if not all of that, and turn it into parking spaces. I just wondered, is that a planning requirement? Do we have to do that, or have we made a conscious choice to do that? And has any consideration been given to residential amenity and the kind of need and desire for people to have access to their own outside space where they live?
So the aim is for the development to be compliant with the parking restrictions, but also there has been consideration to how residents will live in the space and also what they need. It's more substantial than you would think, that rear space, and it is able to meet both needs. At the moment, the space is fairly unappealing, and whilst it is communal, it's not well used.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I can see on the drawings, obviously, most of the space, according to the drawing, is car parking, but there is some which looks like garden space. Is that communal for all the blocks, or is that private gardens for those ground floor flats?
We're talking about communal space at the rear.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Another question that someone picked me to around kind of reuse versus redevelopment and kind of considerations of the environmental impacts on that. Just to build on that point, obviously the report says that decisions have been taken because the buildings are beyond economic repair or reuse. I think it would be useful in future, it's probably too late now unless you decide this to be the case, of actually trying to quantify the environmental impact as well. Because I know we're talking about building new buildings to a really good environmental standards, but as far as I know, that those positive environmental impacts from having energy efficient buildings could be more than offset by the environmental impact of demolition. That may not be the case, but it'd be useful for us to know and get some kind of quantification of that in order to make an informed decision, because clearly the financial case stacks up. I don't know from the information in the report that the environmental case also stacks up. And we need to obviously make decisions factoring both those considerations. And a last question in terms of kind of unit costs of development. So depending on which figure you use, because I think there's two in there, but if you take the lower figure, it looks like a unit cost of £243,000 for a one-bedroom flat, which just from a layperson's perspective seems like quite a lot. Probably more, well, will be more than the market value of those properties. Is there a reason for that? Does it cost the council more to develop properties than it might a private developer? Or is that just the going rate because of inflation, etc.?
Officer colleagues, please.
So I think there's a number of factors with that. So first of all, the flats and the standards that we do in terms of space standards are larger than a lot of private developers will develop to. So obviously, bigger footprint, there's more cost associated. We are building to a higher standard, so a lot of developers will just build purely to building regs in terms of like the environmental aspects. Where we're trying to go to passive house, there's not a huge cost, but there is a slightly higher cost associated with that. But then obviously the resident has a long-term benefit as a result. I think again, every development's different. It's quite a difficult site, this, so it's a restricted existing site, demolishing an existing building. There's not a lot of space for them to develop, so again, that leads potentially to higher cost. We will do a full competitive tender exercise, to test that this is a budget estimate that we've done in house. We will tender it to the market and see if there's efficiencies and savings. And I think there is always a difference between developing 6 units on a one plot, as opposed to a large national developer which may be developing like 1,000 homes on a site. That's going to drive efficiencies you're never going to get on a site like this.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cal. And thank you all. I will approve this report and the recommendations in this report, which means for Democratic Services that I can't take part in any planning committee decision or discussion of this, although I think Cal's done the planning committee's job for it at the moment, which is what I'm very grateful for. It was very interesting in that you mentioned, Cal, the economic cost and the environmental cost, both of which I'll come to. There's a third cost that we look at, which is the social cost. And it's a point that Ray and Maria touched on, which is this is rubbish to live in. And this is not acceptable to live in. And the social cost of doing nothing is just years of inaction, which has followed years of inaction because we didn't know when we built the thing, which is highly frustrating. So I'm having three costs, not just the two you outlined. The economic case is unarguable. The social case is unarguable. Adam outlining the sort of experiences that residents would have to go through if we did it with people in it reminds me very much of Leamington and Horatia House, I have to say, Maria, when going through that nightmare of having to do that. So for me, and also the second point which comes back to your question, Cal, which is around us actually having higher standards for our tenants and leaseholders than private developers do, which does affect the economic cost, but I think is the best way forwards. So I think the social cost stacks up, as well as the environmental, as well as the economic costs. I do want to come back to the environmental costs. Maria, the one-word answer to your question about passive house is no. It won't be done everywhere, but we will do it where we can, because as the report outlined that I approved earlier on, a few years ago, there are some sites where it just doesn't work. But making sure homes are as green as possible does work. But where we can, we will. So the accurate answer, the true answer, is highly misleading. And that's not fair on you, and it's not fair on anyone else. So where we can, we will. But there's a real risk that it won't be everywhere. And that's frustrating. However, the environmental points that Charlotte and Cal and I have raised previously are accurate. And I think as part of the asset management strategy, what we have to do is do something that's quite boring and quite management, which is look at the whole life cost of all this, which is the environmental costs of demolition, the environmental benefits of having new places and everything else. That doesn't mean to say things won't happen, doesn't mean to say things will be held up, but it's just a case of being as transparent as possible. It's not to say we can't demolish anything, because carbon might be emitted into the atmosphere. We have to sometimes, and it's painful to do it, but we have to do it, and in this case, we should have done it a while ago, but we're doing it now, and that's due to the proactive work on regards to everybody. So I think the environmental impact as part of the asset management strategy is definitely going to be in there somewhere, because we've got to, and we should. And I'm also keen on decarbonising the housing stock as well, but that's down to circumstances out of my control, in part, not least because it's part of the war on motorists, apparently. But we do want to take forward those ideas around overall environmental impact across the whole life of a project, which is demolition as well as that, going forwards. But sometimes we do have to demolish these things, because there's the social cost as well as the environmental cost and the economic cost. On the grounds of all three, I agree the recommendations in the report. So, Joe, we can continue. If Ray, Charlotte, or Cal want to discuss anything involving individuals, please do it as part of your opposition briefings, which I am constitutionally bound to know nothing about, which is a good thing, but please do that. And so on that basis, thank you very much, colleagues. I close the meeting at 10:37 a.m. And Maria, thank you very, very much for your service. We're very grateful.